Hey there friends, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing well. Today I have a super fun project to share. We're going to create this top folding trifold mini album that has so many fun flip pages inside. I'm using the Be Happy collection from Echo Park and it is so super cute. I just cannot even stand it. But the inside of this trifold mini has pages that flip in all different directions, and I was able to get some use out of some of those 4x4 image cut aparts that I might not have been able to incorporate into a card. So if that sounds good to you, then stick with me and we'll make this together. So I'm working with the Be Happy collection from Echo Park. This is absolutely stunning, and I did share this in last week's video. I did a haul for the supplies I gathered for our 12 Days of Christmas in July series, and I shared this and a couple of other things that weren't really Christmas related, but since I was putting in an order, I figured I would treat myself to a couple of new collections. Now, I don't find many that I absolutely have to have, but this one was on that list. It is so bright and cheerful. Everybody loves bees, and I think the sentiments on the cut aparts work for just about any occasion. So I think this is going to be a great collection to work with, and it works really well with different palettes. So you can have blues, you can have yellows, you can have blacks, and create combinations within those palettes that will give you a similar but very different look. So I've just got a couple of pieces here that are going to make up the base for our little flip book, and I'm using 65 pound weight cardstock for all of these pieces. I want to create a very nice thick chunky book, so I'm using this white, and then I'll add my layer of black cardstock along with the pattern papers. So the first piece is going to be 4 high by 8 3/4 wide. I'm going to score it at 4 and also 4 3/4. So I'll wind up with a finished size of 4x4 for the pages. And then I'm going to go up on the measurement for the spine for the next piece. So this one is going to be 4 high by 9 wide. It's still scored at 4, but now it's also scored at 5. So our outside layer will have a 1-inch spine. And you really want to think about how many flip pages you want to include in this folio before you decide how thick your spine needs to be. If you only want to have one flip per section, then I would recommend sticking with the spine sizes to be 1/2 inch for the inside and 3/4 for the outside. But because I want to include different flips for each section, I'm going to go with this thicker spine to accommodate the bulk of all of those layers. So I have measured this out to be opening top down. And for some reason, I just seem to want to make projects that are difficult to photograph. But I think it's more fun to have all the interactive pieces. And so this is just going to be one that kind of unfolds and has so much room to finish as you work along. I put a couple of arrows here and numbers so that I know where my pieces are going to be added together. So the first one I want to do is combine the 2 back pieces that will be the outside of the cover. And so I'm going to go ahead and use my 2 glue combo for these sections. Definitely want these to be well secured because these are going to move a lot. So I've just got that double-sided adhesive and a row of my Tombow. And you can see that I put my arrows going in the same direction. For me, when I make the books, I want to know where all the pieces are going to fall before I start to arrange them. So if I'm working along just by myself, I can usually keep track of that. But for videos, I need to work ahead far enough so that I can assemble these things for the camera. And so it helps me to remember where everything goes. If I put a number and an arrow with that, So basically I'm just going to line up my score line here with the corner, and then also the side and the bottom, so that I can keep it nice and straight and even. So here's going to be the full width. Well, it will actually show like this, but when it's folded up, we'll get our depth here on the side. So next thing I want to do is add one section here that will show just by itself along with the flap. And I want to include another flip page here as well. So I've marked this one for this section and added my arrow as well. For the front section, I only want to have one flip just because I want to be able to have the insides receiving the most room for the bulk that I want to add. So I'm just repeating that process with my two glues. I'll line up my arrows and then adhere these together. So this is going to be the full base. And if you wanted to, you could incorporate pattern paper along the spine here. And I recommend doing this portion while you're able to lay it flat. So I've got my pattern paper and cardstock cut. And for the spine, my cardstock is 3 7/8 by 7/8. The pattern paper is 3 3/4 by 3/4. And like I mentioned, it's just a whole lot easier to get this positioned while you can get it flat. This is not a necessary step, but it does have a nice finished edge. So the last thing I want to do to finish up the cover is to reinforce this piece, which will be basically the top page. And I have a piece of that 65-pound weight cardstock here. It's cut to be 4 high by 8 wide. I scored it at 4, and then I've added my adhesive here. I will want to wrap that front, not only to give it extra layers for sturdiness, but it will also give that top flap a nice finished edge where it will be most noticeable. So I'm going to put my glues on there, and I will line it up here along that score line and just wrap that over. When I have that secured, I'll just repeat that process for this side as well. And because all those pages are the same size, it is definitely going to be easy to assemble this. So now we have the outside cover done. We can move to the inside to add our collection papers. Now, this kit is going to have 3x4, 4x4, and 4x6 cut aparts, which are pretty standard. And I typically don't get the opportunity to use that full 4x4 cut apart image because my projects tend to be a little bit smaller, but I'm going to use them as a full page. So I didn't cut them down except to make them the size so that I can use my black cardstock border. So I have my cardstock cut to be 3 7/8 by 3 7/8. And then all the pattern papers are 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. So I just clipped my cut apart down into that size. And so I can incorporate the whole thing. You can decide if you want to use the images in that way, or maybe you want to add another different pattern and top it with a doily or some other flat finishing detail. That's definitely one of the ways that you can alter this to make it your own creation. And so I'm just going to go through and finish the insides of this first flip. All of those measurements work throughout the whole book, including the back and front cover. So this is going to go together really quickly. And because all of these inside pieces are less than 4 inches, this is a really good way to get the most use out of your 12 by 12 paper packs and cardstocks. That very little offcut was created. And so here is that first section that you will see with one flip on this one. When we move into the center, we're going to have 2 flips for each portion. So I want to create more of the white cardstock as the flips and then cover it with our pattern paper. So each of the sections on the inside are going to have 2 flips, and one will go this way and then one will go in the opposite direction. So for each section, I have 2 more pieces of that 65 pound weight cardstock cut to be 4 high by 8 wide and scored at 4. So that's exactly in half. And then I'm going to adhere these together using that same method, including my numbers and my arrows so that I keep everything in the right orientation. And once again, this is where you want to have multiple glues, keeping my arrows in the right direction and lining that up in the corner and then the side and the bottom. So for my top portion, I want this to open outward toward the left. And so I'm going to adhere this to the top with that going the left way. When I get to the center one, I'm going to switch and have it open toward the right. Once again, because I want to make picture taking as difficult for myself as possible, but I think it will just be more interesting when it's open and more dynamic. So let's go ahead and torture ourselves with the photography, but make it more fun to fill and enjoy. So I want to make sure to keep everything above that score line just so that I don't interfere with this functioning properly. And the hardest part for me is always keeping my hands out of the glue, but that went pretty easily. And so you can see that it will open this way toward the outside, and then also this way for that top layer. So here's another one of those extra cute 4x4 cut aparts, and it has the same black border and the same border showing of the base. Now I'm guessing most of you would think that the yellow plaid is my favorite pattern of this collection, but I really actually love this little buzzin' bee with the daisies. Has the cutest little smile on, and it just makes me so happy. So I'm gonna pick this one as my favorite, and it also helps to make more varieties of color palettes, so that's really nice. Okay, got that side finished. Let's finish the inside here as well. For this one, I decided to use some offcuts. I have made a couple of cards with this collection already, and so I had some pieces that I would like to get used up. This gave me the opportunity as well to incorporate some of the patterns that were less contrasting. So I think if you wanted to incorporate some of the non-contrasting patterns, this would be a great place to have your journaling, and you can write directly on that paper and it will be easy to see. And I did use up my scraps, so that makes me happy not to put them in the scrap bin. So here is the first one. And as I mentioned, for my next center section here, it will open toward the right. And so I've got my 2 glues in place, and I'll just add that here. I have created this with the exact same measurements and the exact same process. So this is going to make the overall project go much faster and easier. So that one folds out toward that way. And then my last section will be created with the exact same measurements and the exact same process and my 2 glue combo. And this one is going to open toward the left. So I've got all of these pieces in place. We can fold them up and then start to work on our cover. You see how nice and full that is? You're still going to have room to add all your pictures in there, and it won't be too bulky to close, but it will be chunky and heavy and nice, and that is just how we like our minis. So let's go ahead and put the back cover on. I did want to make sure all of these outside areas were finished nicely as well. And this is the time where you want to think about your trim if you are going to add that as a ribbon closure. I have this beautiful checkerboard satin from Really Reasonable Ribbon, and so I think this will be a beautiful coordinated trim to add just to close this little mini up. I've taken enough to tie a generous bow. I'll just tack that into place temporarily. I'm gonna fold this open now to make it easier to work on this front cover. Remember, our orientation is going to be folding up, so let's go ahead and just make sure we get everything going in the right direction. So for this piece, I did combine a couple of those patterns again, just to utilize my offcuts. And it doesn't matter how many layers you add, as long as your outside dimensions come to 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 for that pattern paper. And so I just kind of broke up that plaid with a little bit more of the pattern that we have on the back cover. So let's add a little bit of decoration for the front. Because this is smaller, I went with a super small die cut doily. I just cut that from a crisp white cardstock, and I am positioning this all the way over to the corner to make room for our flower arrangement. Now I took an additional one of those 4x4 cut aparts, and I clipped it down with a die that was a circle with a stitched edge for a little bit of extra detail. And this helps to minimize the background for this so that it will fit onto our front cover. And as you can see, I am going to add those with my foam spacers. This is super sweet little bee image here, and it has its own natural border, so I didn't have to worry about adding more cardstock. You can see that black border is really mimicking what we've done on our pattern paper pages. So here's my flowers, and these are made by me with offcuts from other projects. So this was a good way to get through some of my scraps. I have combined the blue and yellow that was in the background, and I use my poinsettia die. It gets a lot of mileage, even though it's not Christmas. For these projects, I think it works really well to mix up the petal shape. I'm going from pointy to round just to give it a little bit more variety. I finished it with some die cut foliage, netting, loopy twine bows, and then of course the center of this flower is made with the double head stamens from Really Reasonable Ribbon. And you can see when I position it, it's just going to kind of hug that corner and fill it in. I'm going to add that with hot glue to make sure that it's well secured. You can come back in and add a little stickles to the petals, I think, if you wanted to include a little bit of extra detail. But for now, I think we'll just stick with my usual finishing details. So I've got the extra sweet little bee charms. I want them to rest on top of this raised section. So I have them tied together so I can position them exactly where I want them to fall. Then I'll add my hot glue. And then I'll just stretch this twine right into that. And that will capture the placement that I want. I'll clip off the excess and top that with a button to hide the cut strings. Finish off the rest of this cover with some sequins. I'm putting one on top of the raised section, and then I'll bring the other two down onto the lower area. And I'll adhere these with my Tombow. And that's going to be it for our Trifold Flip Mini with all of those fun flip pages, created with the Be Happy collection from Echo Park. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to let me know in the comments and give me a big thumbs up for this video. If you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day. And I thank you so much for watching.